forward to having this conversation. It's an area that you and I like to spend a lot of time in. Scott McKenna, Jason Spector with Catamount Consulting. We have a lot of conversations about peak performance with peak performance people, coaching, supervisors, leadership teams. A month ago, Stacy and I jumped on a similar webinar and talked a lot about engaging staff. Today, we're talking a bit about building top performing teams. They really just blend. In my mind, it's all the same thing when you get going on it. 30 minutes is barely skimming the surface, but it just blends. And ultimately, to me, what comes to mind with everything is what is the purpose or what is the goal? If we're working with athletes, we're talking about what is the goal? And the goal for a company is to make money, be productive, be safe, right? I mean, I'm just naming a few of the big ones, but without those components, we can't be successful at all. We can't lose people, we can't lose money, we can't lose quality, we'll lose customers. Having people that work for us that are highly engaged in part of our tribe or our team is important because we can't do anything by ourselves. We must have a team. It's not a road all by ourselves. Good coaches are also good at being coached. So I'm excited about going through the conversation. It's all around engaging staff, this greenhouse effect, where if we're putting the right water and food into our greenhouse, then it should grow and be successful, or we can just ignore it and leave it and it'll just wilt and die. And ultimately, we want to be tribe-like, which it's connected with culture and creating the right culture. Cult being part of culture reminds me of tribe, and cult tends to be kind of a dirty word in society compared to tribe, but that's what we're looking for. People that are highly engaged, want to be part of our team, understand that we've got to rummage and fight and find for food and take care of our own, our young, our wives, our husbands. It's tribe-like. So today's golden nuggets, if you want to say golden nuggets to kick things off, is how do we increase communication with our staff? How do we increase trust with our staff? How do we improve that culture? And to me, on the business side, if we just look at it outside of the athletic performance, but on the business side, I think about the 12 elements of great management. And the book prior to that and the research that the Gallup pollsters have put in place, which was First Break All the Rules, which had 1 million interviews with companies and top performers all around the country. This one had 10 million interviews with companies from all around the world. I said country before. This is around the world in multiple languages, multiple types of businesses. And then they came out with It's the Manager. And this is a 20+ year run. And they came back with all of the same information. They came back with, and I'm just going to summarize because you and I are on the same page with this. We spent a lot of time with it, but I strongly recommend anyone that's listening to us, maybe pick up some of this stuff, go through it and think about it a little bit and add some of the components that we're chatting about. But when you have staff that are saying yes to things like, I have all of the information I need to do my work successfully. I have the tools to do my work successfully. My opinion seems to count at work. I have someone that I can report to that'll listen to me and take my feedback. Things like in the past 7 to 10 days, I've been told about the good or the bad that I'm doing, right? It's a constant reiteration, not just waiting for an annual review, but this just didn't really go great today, Jason. It doesn't mean that we lost. It just means that we've got to make some adjustments and fill those gaps. And tomorrow we're going to nail it out of the park, dude. This is the way it's going to go. It's a constant reiteration and a constant discussion. There's my supervisor and the people that oversee me care about me, and maybe more than just me and my job and that I'm having quality product out there, but what are my kids doing? Do I like to hunt? Do I like to fish? Am I a wrestling coach? Am I a husband? Am I a wife? That personal touch, which gets a little bit on the emotional side, which I know that you're just on the edge of your seat to talk about. So that's a lot of stuff I wanted to throw out just to kick off today's conversation. Right back from the beginning, we're looking at engagement, we're looking at tribe, we're looking at culture. It all blends together. All the research is there. How are we going to pull the trigger and make this actually work as an operation?
Yeah, the word engagement seems to be, the word for 2022 with all the work that we've been doing with Catamount. And I think that, that is really a brand that sets the work we're doing apart from other groups or from, the rest of the pack. And engagement is, interesting because all the other parts of it, I mean, we're talking about numbers and we're talking about success and productivity, but really it's the engagement that matters most. And how are you, influencing engagement? And we create actionable items. Hitting home runs is certainly a perk for baseball, and getting takedowns and pins is what you want in wrestling, and scoring goals for soccer. But what are the actionable items that transfer from the practice space or the daily practices into winning the game, right? Hitting the home run. And I think one of the, so if engagement is the home run, if engagement is the goal, using that metaphor of soccer, if that's the end game, that's the product, what's the process? And I think we outline the process very well. And as we kind of work through communication, trust, and culture, I think some of those process, daily practice focuses are going to come to light. It's the actionable items that we can take in our day-to-day routines to ignite those three things, and ultimately hit that home run out of the park and hit an engaging grand slam.
Yeah, and what's the byproduct? I mean, I want to remind you and me both that what's the opposite? Unengaged staff are going to cost us millions of dollars in our companies due to lost productivity, showing up late, punching in late, taking a longer work break, maybe faking a workman's comp injury, right? I mean, you think of all these nasty things, just literally stealing from my department store shelves or my construction trailer, theft, shrinkage, as they would consider it, I guess, in the business world. But the amount of money we lose from not having them engaged following 12 is a real major number that we can't write off. It's right off our bottom line.
Yeah, I think when I think of disengagement, I start to think about the narrative that we create, and I do it myself in my role as an educator. If I'm having a bad day, I can easily start to create this narrative that the administration doesn't care, that, parents aren't doing their jobs, that kids are disrespectful. And I create this narrative and I start to disengage more from, the work that I'm doing as an educator. So I think we all can fall victim to this, narrative. And one of my favorite bumper stickers, I was working with a collegiate athletic team a week ago, and I told them about this bumper sticker I happened to see last week that said, "Just because you think it doesn't mean it's true." But I think disengagement is really a byproduct, is having this narrative that the company doesn't care, that my boss doesn't care, that this job sucks, and all these negative reasons are why. And so that is really, I think, an element of that, how I would classify or identify disengaged, people.
I agree. So how do we get there? I mean, let's just talk a little bit about communication. Communication is a big piece of the puzzle. Communication is a key component. What can we do to be better in the communication process with our students, our athletes, our employees, our co-supervisors, co-coaches, husband, wife, mom, grandpa, right? I mean, how can we open up the lines of communication? And is that what we're really looking for to increase engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things in 12, or several of the elements of 12, really have a lot to do with how good of a listener we can be. We take reading, we take writing, we spend, a lot of our academic careers, K through 12, and bachelor education, spending time on writing and speaking, but we very rarely get practice or coached or taught how to be better at listening. And I think, all of our personal relationships, and easily I snicker because I know you're probably thinking of marriage and, our relationships with our spouses, but that's the most essential element to any relationship, is the ability to listen. And I even said it to my wife this morning. She's not a little under the weather, and she was on her way to work, and I get to stay home because, as I disclosed earlier, I'm an educator, right? You feel that because your wife is the same. But, I said to her, "I see you." I said, "Sawabono," because in African, that means I see you. And when you see someone, you hear someone, and that strengthens every relationship.
I'm not sure my wife listens as well as yours, though. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but it's funny when you say listen, because I'm trying to listen, and the whole time I'm thinking about what I'm going to say on the backside of what you're talking about. So I'm not sure how good I'm actually listening to you at all.
Well, maybe without the audience and this technology, you'd be better at it if we were across
Maybe,
from each other in person.
maybe. I'd have to write notes, I think, maybe record it, listen to it 7 times to really retain it. So but we're all guilty of talking more than we're watching and listening. And the best part about communication is the listening and the watching twice as much as we talk, right? We have 2 sets of eyes and 2 sets of ears for a reason, I think. It's because we're supposed to listen and watch more than we talk. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it opens up some level of vulnerability in us, in our leadership style, if we're willing to listen, retain it, and perhaps even remember to talk about it the next day or 2 days later. How did that work out last Monday? How was your first 7 days at work? How did
Right.
your school day go? Right. I think that opens up a huge piece of the puzzle.
Right. I mean, 2 things that I say all the time, doesn't matter what group I'm speaking to. I used to do a lot of work with parents and teachers and professional development. But, one of the things that we say is, the 3 most powerful words you can put together is tell me more. And, that's just a conscious awareness for yourself to use that as a strategy so that you shut up for a bit and you extract more from the person and they feel, and we can get into the nerdy brain science, and I think we will as we move forward in this call, but that makes people feel important, right? When I say tell me more about that, I need to know more about how those first 7 days went. I need to know about how your afternoon was. I want to know more about what you do with your family when you're in your free time. And then the other thing is, pausing and just waiting for those, few extra uncomfortable seconds that let the person know that you really want to hear, you really want to connect with them. And that's how our brains really do the best work. That's when our brains are most comfortable. And, we're going to talk about it, but I'll just throw it out there right now. That's a belonging cue. Tell me more. Pause. There's a belonging cue. That's one of the 3 essential elements to culture.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. I spend a lot of time in the construction and mining industry, which is overwhelmingly loaded with men. And there's a lot of great women in our industry. Some of the best equipment operators that I work with are women. It's not to say that I don't have a lot, but it's heavily populated with men. And they are horrible communicators. They're certainly very bad listeners. And they're horrible communicators in general. And they just, it doesn't mean that they just flap and talk like, needlessness. They don't listen and they don't communicate properly. There's no belonging cues. There's no emotion. There is no brain science in this at all. And what a huge piece that we're missing. If we could just be really good at equipment operating and supervising people on a construction site and coaching, listening, caring, being involved, imagine how powerful that individual, or although you've been around them as much as I have, how powerful would they be? I mean, you wouldn't be able to stop them, is my answer.
Yeah, and when we implement that in our consulting work and the training and coaching that we've done, it always goes appreciated. It never goes underappreciated. It is a skill set that 100% of the groups that we've been working with, the individuals have open arms accepted as a great approach to enhancing their effectiveness and relationships. So no one ever finds it as a waste of time or not beneficial.
So building top performing teams, companies, programs, et cetera, communication. The big golden nugget is make sure that we're listening. Make sure we're listening with intent, and make sure, as you always remind me, lean in, right? I'm leaning in when I'm listening because it's my attention deficit disorder is so poor. If I don't, I'm definitely not paying attention at all or retaining it. And I may even have to take some notes, but I'm leaning in and I'm attentive on the communication process. And it's so nice takeaway. I'd like to talk a little bit about building good teams. Again, I know that we're blended here and it's not really choppy. We're just going to continue on, but I want to spend a little time talking about trust within our teams. And is trust even important? Does it matter if my employees trust me? Does it matter if they know the mission? Does it matter if they understand what my goals, expectations, and thoughts are? Do all those things even matter? Do they trust me?
Yeah, the trust is huge, and you played around with the word vulnerability when we're talking communication, and I think vulnerability is one of, if not the most important ingredient for creating trust. One of the things that we have to probably reference, because it is such a great resource. I don't have the title of the link, but Simon Sinek, an amazing thought leader and author and speaker. He's all plastered all over the internet, so it wouldn't take long to search Sinek. Maybe people have heard of him. He's that popular. He's kind of a household name in some circles, but he has a reference to the Navy SEALs, and the Navy SEALs are obviously fascinating for many reasons, but you'd think that, as far as on your chart there behind you, peak performance being at the bottom, Navy SEALs are among the highest level peak performers on earth. And Simon Sinek kind of shows this metric graph in one of his talks about what the Navy SEALs look for when they're recruiting. And I know your son Tanner is looking to go to West Point, and I would say that in all, recruiting and when they look through resumes and accomplishments and achievements, that's one of his goals, and he's going through that process right now, which is rigorous and a tiny percent get through. But I know that they're probably looking at the character traits as well as the performance. You have all these bullets on your resume, and the example I give is Rambo. Is probably a reference that we can all remember as being a pretty badass soldier, right? But he was an individual. His skill set, he was a high performer in military skills, and but I think that Simon Sinek would say the Navy SEALs would probably not see him as an asset because of the trust level required. So the Navy SEALs put a higher premium, a higher rating on trust than they do on performance, on the hard skill performance. So no matter how much of a, I can't think of another word to describe it, badass you are, if you don't have high metric or high measurement score for trust, then you're not as desirable as someone who's high trust, medium level performer. So the soft skill, which really I don't think it is a soft skill, I think it's actually a harder skill of being trustworthy. And again, what comes into trust, I think, is vulnerability. So your willingness to be vulnerable, going back to communication, how well you are, how approachable you are. I think that, that's profound when you think about somebody who'd make a great Navy SEAL. You're thinking of somebody who's got all the physical attributes and can do all the physical skills. And really, they would rather see someone with the social, emotional, context for trust.
Right, and that's an elite level, right? When we reference the SEALs or a military general, the best of the best have all of it, the combination, and we can dramatically scale that back. I don't want to use the word dummy it down for a lot of what we do. We can be a really good husband by just making sure that we're in tune with some of these skills, and certainly be trustworthy. We can be a good boss or a leader at work if we just put some of this stuff into play. We don't have to be able to do pull-ups, push-ups, and hang out in the ocean all day to get to that point. So it's a little exciting to me because it's obtainable. Navy SEAL level wouldn't be obtainable to me. You reference West Point, and I always think about Angela Duckworth's research into, I think it was Angela Duckworth or it was Carol Dweck, doesn't matter, it's all around mindset, and they reference gritty. That's definitely Angela Duckworth on the gritty side, but gritty is passion and perseverance, and that really resonates inside of trust. I'm passionate and I'm still going to be rugged on. I'm still going to be rigid. I'm still going to expect you to perform at a high level, or I'm going to find someone else to hang out with. But it's a passion and perseverance, and she named it gritty. And in the first chapter of her book, she referenced BEAST, which is part of West Point, and all of the research that she did with the on-site psychiatrist for West Point led them to come to the conclusion that it wasn't IQ, because these are really the three levels to get into West Point. It's IQ, standardized test scores, athletic ability, and then standardized test scores and IQ and athletic abilities, as well as leadership skills, like you mentioned, very part of the Boy Scouts, the fire department. None of those were as deciding of a factor of kids making it through BEAST other than grit. If they could find the gritty guy or gal, passion and perseverance, they could be less on the IQ scale, less on the leadership scale, according to how they're measuring it, and a number of other factors. So I just think it's it, because that's all around attitude and trust, right? They're gonna help you up, or maybe even slow down their jog to get you a little bit better versus trying to be first.
Right.
The goal.
Yeah, you know, I think we're escalating here because we first started talking about communication, and I referenced belonging cues, and then we talked about trust, and I like how you made note of, you know, you have high expectations, you have a high standard, you're gritty, but vulnerability is really an essential element to build this trust.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, when we look at Daniel Coyle's work with culture code, the belonging cues, one, shared vulnerability, two, and then the third is going to have to be with common story. And we're going to talk about that in culture next, but it is an escalation of the three things we're talking on today, right? Is being a good communicator.
And then, was that your way of disciplining me for escalating? Is that like a fancy word for shut up?
I don't think so.
I feel like you're disciplined, no escalation. Let's make note of that. But you're right. And when we get into culture, really, or tribe, and what that all means, I think of me wanting to create a tribe in my athletic programs or the companies I work with, in that we have a common goal, right? If I'm an Indian tribe, we've got to get food, we've got to get shelter, we've got to make sure that we have warmth, fire. We've got to have all these things, right? We got to take care of each other, because if I don't have people making sure the fire is tended to, I can't have people out hunting. They'll come back to a cold spot, not able to cook. I got to have the vegetable garden growing. That's my greenhouse, right? It's holistic, this tribe mentality. Years ago, I'm going to escalate a little bit. Sorry, it won't take long. But years ago, I spoke at a VPPA conference in Louisiana, and a very large petroleum company had 84 people there. Now, these types of conferences have 5,000 people. It's $1,000 a head. This company sent 84, right there. It's a big company.
Wow.
They didn't have just some generic shirts that they all wore. I will never forget, they showed up in a jersey with their company name on it and a number and their name on the back, right? And I immediately said, that's really cool. That is holistic tribe approach. It looked like it was the football program, but it wasn't. It was their company, their tribe, their teammates, and their name, not someone else's name on their back.
Right.
And that pulls it all together to me in my mental state of, that's a tribe. That's a tribe I'd be willing to work for.
Yeah, that's powerful. And, you know, there's definitely science on that. I think in culture code, they talk about a call center that was having retention issues, and they did an experiment, and they gave shirts out that had the company name to one group, and they gave shirts out to another group that had the name of the individual on it. And that group had profoundly, you know, higher percentage rate of retention. It might have been close to 100% versus the group that got the company logo. That's fascinating. What that does is, because, you know, it's that connection. And, you know, the brain is fascinating. And I think any endeavor that we participate in these days, there's so much out there that reminds us how effective it is to understand brain science. And, you know, we're really not much different. Our brains aren't wired much different than cave people. That's why in this, you know, advanced technological age, it is so hard to navigate social media and navigate the use of technology without getting stressed and without having our, you know, emotions compromised. Especially with our teens and young people with unformed brains. But, you know, we are still wired to have a saber-toothed tiger, you know, rustle in the bushes and have us go into, you know, adrenaline and cortisol releases so that we can get safe, right? So knowing that is pretty profound. And we're not at the top of the food chain. There's things that can eat us, right? There's things that, but we don't have the sharpest teeth and we're not the strongest creature. But when we come together as pack, as a tribe, as a group, we survive, and we survive quite well. And the brain is conditioned for that. So I mentioned adrenaline and cortisol. Serotonin and oxytocin are two of the most beneficial neurotransmitters and hormones that exist for human brain and human culture. So if you are a leader, if you're a team member, and you are hacking that brain science and understanding how to produce oxytocin, how to produce serotonin in others through conversation and interactions and collaboration, now you're investing in culture. So just as scary as the saber-toothed tiger is nurturing and fulfilling as a conversation, someone who's a good listener, or a moment of shared vulnerability, or some of these actionable items that we employ that create a connection between, people at work. And 12 references that.
Yep. And I would caution all of us that we are also built to be lazy. We may be top of the food chain, but human beings are built to be lazy, save on energy, save on the need for food. And my son, who was thinking about trying to get into West Point or some sort of military division, his conversation with me the other night, which you'll appreciate, was along the lines of, think about this. There may be a time where all of us ride motorized scooters just because we can in the grocery store. If they make them cooler and I can get 4 of them on the back of my minivan, we may not need to walk at all. And it's who knows, right? I mean,
Right.
We are lazy creatures, so we have to be careful that we recognize that if we don't have to fight and we don't have to rummage for food, we don't have to work hard to get gasoline in our automobile or food on our table, or even build a wood fire to stay warm, that does start to wither us a bit, possibly. And I'm not trying to be too much of a hard ass on this, but we do have to recognize it. So, which leads me a bit to building top performing teams has as much to do with the coach than it does the athlete. There's no such thing as bad employees, there's only bad leaders. So you're going to have to look in the mirror. If your team is not performing at a high level, it's probably you. And if you can't take ownership in that, then you're going to struggle. And a lot of people who think they're performing at a top level really struggle with the conversation that might be critical, receiving the coaching and the feedback.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've always said in any of the speaking work that I do is the difference between a high performer and an average performer, not even a low performer. The difference between high performance and average performance is the ability to self-reflect continuously. And
Yeah.
self-reflection isn't a part of your daily practice. And we know mindfulness. I think 90% of the world's top performers in the book Tools for Titans by Tim Ferriss, 90% are using meditative practice. I think if you're not being reflective and you're not taking, breaks to be fully present, then yeah, I think that you could be part of the problem. And people work very hard, tirelessly, and put in, an amazing effort, but it's just shy of madness if you're not being self-reflective and you're not, using strategies to be fully present.
Yeah, working from the neck up, right? It's we do such a small amount of it. Zig Ziglar was famous for saying, if I didn't eat breakfast this morning, it'd be the first thing I'd talk about. Jason, you wouldn't believe how busy I was. So hungry. Did you hear me? How hungry I am? I haven't had breakfast. And you'd be like, I can't believe you didn't have breakfast. Why didn't you have freaking breakfast? But imagine if I came in the room and said, it's been a month since I've listened to a book, an Audible, watched a YouTube or a TED Talk, or reflected to the board behind me, which stays up all the time, or looked at 12, right? What am I doing to perform from the neck up? It's, I know we're low on time. I wish we had 4 hours, right, Jason? Maybe we'll meet up for coffee later on this afternoon and keep talking, right? Then
I see a great question. Sorry to interrupt you, but I see a great question came in.
Oh, great.
Says, do you see different challenges in changing culture / engagement in private companies versus state-run organizations or municipalities? Do you have advice for either?
I definitely see a difference, and I do a little bit of work in both. I choose to gravitate towards the private sector. I don't know if it's all around attitude and engagement. I'm just taking the question from you, Jason. It could be money. I could find, if I looked in my budget, that there's more money in the private sector than there is the government sector. I don't really know, but I do get a feeling when I work with the private sector that there's a different level of engagement and encouragement than some of the government sectors I work for. You're in the government sector. You spend the majority of your year inside of a school system and are playing with this. I think that could be another whole sidebar conversation itself.
Yeah, my mindset, I always say educators have the best jobs in the world. And unfortunately, I do know some educators that, would argue me on that. I mean, I always joke, but it's true. 10 months a year I work, right? I have summers off, and I'm done teaching, by 2:30, and I can stay as early as late as I want, depending on what I have going on. And, I'm off right now this week. So I have a really amazing career and job, and I'm appreciative of it. And I give service every day I go to school and give value. I'm a service provider, but there's some people that don't do that. And I know when we're talking education, it's a little different than maybe some of the other government or state-run municipalities. But I would say this: I'd say the brain science is no different. I would say the best practices are no different, whether you're in education or you're in the private sector. So our implementation and our strategies and our brand of leadership and engagement, I don't think there's a difference. But I do know that in the private sector, you can be profoundly more successful than in some of the state-run organizations, I would assume, based on my experiences in education. But, I do feel like in the work that I do as an educator, I infect, and my attitude is pretty contagious. And I think that there's that element as well. So if you're a leader among your team and you're moving the right direction, that becomes kind of contagious. But I do know that the brain science and best practices do not matter who you're working with. They are 100% effective over time.
Agreed. It doesn't matter. It's science at this point. It's not just principles and theories. It's science. Doesn't matter whether you're working with a 4-year-old child or you're working with a 70-year-old man. Even old dogs can learn tricks if you give them the correct food and water, like we talked about in the greenhouse. So it's all work, though. So if you want to drive around the motorized scooter, right, it probably isn't going to be really successful. And I know we're close on time. We are going to continue series like this. We certainly would like feedback, ideas, thoughts, phone calls, any way that you want to talk to Jason, myself, Stacy, any of our other top performing leaders inside of our organization that work with other organizations to perform at a peak level. Coaches, parents, supervisors, we're happy to talk about it. Just remember that your attitude is everything. Attitude you can build on. Attitude needs to be encouraged. All right. It's not skills and talents. It's really the attitude. And as much as we can do to help all of the people around us be as successful as they possibly can and get exactly what they want, the better we're going to be. We will get exactly what we want out of the same process. Coach and be coached. So I appreciate it. It was great seeing you, Jason.
Yeah.
And we hope that everyone has a great day, right?
Here's two actionable items before the end of the day. Tell someone or say to someone, tell me more. Try that strategy for communication and listening. And then number 2, get present by going outside for 10 minutes as lunch is approaching here very soon. Get outside, walk 5 minutes one direction, turn around and walk 5 minutes back. Your day will improve tenfold.
I'm going to do both those at the same time. I saw some people walk by out here. I'm going to stop and talk to them.
Crush it.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. We'll see you
All
later.
right. See ya.
Have a good day.
You as well. Take care.